way in which contemporary science views the universe and man is not easily understandable. The mathematics and physics, which are the basic tools for man to interpret the laws of the universe, produce in many instances definitions and results that are difficult for the ordinary mind to comprehend. I met with the professor of astrophysics at the University of Athens, Manos Danezis, at the Athens Planetarium, and I asked him to explain the methods and manner in which contemporary physics and mathematics explain and determine what we call the universe. Professor Danezis, we live in nature, in a cosmos, and see a universe that we interpret as we see it and feel it, we simple people. You scientists, however, who have delighted in scientific research and have plumbed the depths of the universe, have in mind a different way to interpret it. Would you tell us a few things about the universe? About the way you see the non-perceptible universe? To what extent one might say it exists?
What I want to say is this. It is not a case of how we see the universe. It is a case of how is the universe revealed in reality. And what I can say is this. The universe is interpreted on the basis of a logic that differs greatly from the logic that we humans have been calling common sense. Without making a mistake, I believe that when we speak of the universe as a whole, and not of the universe near us, the universe of the planets, or the space around the Earth, then whatever human logic considers rational, in reality is absurd, and vice versa. I will explain what I mean. What I want to emphasize at the outset is that what I say is not what we feel, but what is revealed by observation, research, and study. What we know today is that human biology, as nature has made us, does not permit us to receive forms and shapes that are not describable by Euclidean geometry, and whose dimensions are more than 3. That is, if we have an object or shape or form that is non-Euclidean, which is not describable by the geometry we know from school.
Height, width, depth.
Exactly, the geometry of Euclid. And if the dimensions were more than 3, we could not see them. There would be objects here around us. There would be real objects that we would not be able to see.
Certainly.
If you think that it is now commonly accepted, and we all know it, that the universe, in its totality, as a whole, is not describable by Euclidean geometry, and its dimensions are at least 4, you can understand that the forms and shapes created within it are not perceived by man.
Can you describe for us what these 4 dimensions are?
They are well known: length, width, height, time. For contemporary science, what we call time, what is referred to in the theory of relativity, and generally in all physical theories as time, has nothing to do with what we measure by our clocks and calendars.
Is it something different?
It is a dimension like height, width, and length. It is used in our equations in the theory of relativity as a dimension that in no way differs from the others. Under some circumstances, totally structured and limited in space and time, it can also be interpreted as common, measurable, human time. When, however, we study the universe and cosmology, we must not think that what we call time is what we measure with our watches. I told you that we cannot understand and perceive whatever exists in the universe with our senses, because there are 4 dimensions, and they are non-Euclidean. The question you could ask me is this: how then do I see chairs, objects? I see you see me, and we are parts of the universe. Mathematics provides for this, and says that if I take the universe and cut a very small piece of it, an infinitesimal piece, this infinitesimal piece behaves with great approximation like a space described by Euclid. So this piece, this infinitesimal piece, behaves, without being so, like a space described by the geometry of Euclid.
In other words, a perceivable space.
Exactly. A classical example may clarify. You know very well that matter is composed of matter. The atoms are composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons. The electrons, protons, and neutrons, again, are composed of smaller elemental particles, which in their final form are nothing other than energy flow.
It is a wave.
Listen carefully now. Human senses have 3 disadvantages. First, let us take the eye. It cannot perceive all rays or wavelengths, as physicists put it. We cannot see ultraviolet. The rays that our eye can see are infinitesimal in relation to those that exist. The second imperfection of our eyes is that they cannot distinguish as different objects that are located nearer than a particular distance. We see them as one. If there are 2 fires on a mountain and we go far away, we see them as one. And the third weakness of the eye is that it cannot perceive objects that are smaller than a certain magnitude. It doesn't see them at all. An example. Between us, there are specks of dust, immense amounts of material. Do we perceive it? We call it a vacuum. But it is not a vacuum at all. There is an infinity of material that we do not perceive because of its small dimensions. Just think if we did not have those 3 imperfections. What would we see? Would we see the table? No. We would see its atoms. We would see its electrons. We would see, even beyond the electrons, the energy flow. Whatever we see around us would be a soup, thicker here and thinner there. We would not have the perception that this is a table, that this is a machine, this is a chair, that is my pipe. We would see a boundless soup with condensations and dilutions. My eye takes these condensations and dilutions and creates the illusion of an object and of color. Let us now take touch. You extend your hand and say, "I'm touching the table." You are not touching the table. The last structural material of your hand, the moment you say, "I am touching the table," is relatively at an infinite distance from the first structural material of the table. You never do touch it.
There is no contact?
No. What happens? Around the particles that make up the table, there is an energy flow, and around the energy flow of my hand, forces develop that are repulsive. So when I go to put these particles close to each other, they repel, and neurons convey this repulsion to my brain and convert it to what we call contact.
The message that reaches the brain is essentially an illusion.
Of course it is an illusion, for if I did not have these neurons, I might not have sensed anything. This means that everything in the universe communicates with its neighbor. In other words, we are not 2 objects that are unrelated to each other. We are united by an infinite material that we do not perceive, that is in between. We are all one in the universe. Whatever occurs at one point in the universe, because we are a soup, impacts the whole universe. It alters the whole universe. Whoever succeeds in giving you the definition of matter will receive a Nobel Prize. There is no definition, justified definition, of the concept of matter. Matter is a philosophical category. Many have developed different theories about what is matter. This philosophical category is the oldest philosophical category. I will tell you the three most prominent views. Basically, we believe that what we call matter is a condensation of the energy flow, to which I referred previously, that occupies the entire universe. Its condensations, wherever there is a condensation of energy, and this condensation of energy we perceive through our senses, as we said, as matter.
But we do not see it.
We perceive the condensation as matter. We perceive it as matter. The matter of my pipe is a condensation with the unitary universal flux. This condensation, our senses, as they are made up, perceive as that formalism called matter. The elementary particle, as we say. In other words, the element of matter is nothing other than an energy world. A final view which prevails and is beginning to dominate in astrophysics is that matter is nothing other than space. It is a neighbor of time. I'll give an example. A veil, a spread sheet. I can understand nothing about matter from it. If I fold it somewhere, thus creating a curve in the sheet, my senses perceive that curve as matter. In other words, matter is nothing but space.
A curve in space?
A curve in space.
Does this have any relation to curved space-time?
Certainly, certainly. And we will see why we're saying all these things about cosmology and the density of matter and space and so on. So I have been talking about a curve in space, which in the language of physics is synonymous with a large condensation in the particular region. Whether we say a large condensation or we say a curve in space, it is the same thing. For if you take the sheet and collect it at some point, the density of the sheet will be greater because it forms a knot. The third thing we have to understand is this. What we see around us as forms and shapes are simple projections of real shapes that exist in the universe. I'll explain.
Reflections?
No. I'll explain with a simple example. If I had a flat world, a world that understood only length and width and did not understand height,
2 dimensions.
2 dimensions, but it would be an entire world with people and houses. The houses would be like the floor plans architects make. The people would be flat little people. They would open the door, enter the house, and the door would be a linear section that opens and shuts. They would enter and feel secure that no one is watching. If, however, I were above the flat world, I would see them. They would not see me. Why? Because the notion of height that would be projected would not be understood by those people. They would not perceive that I exist, for I would be located at a great height. But if we took a spotlight and cast the light on me from behind, my shadow would fall on the flat space.
Yes.
Then the people would see my shadow. They would perceive not me, but my shadow, and they would probably call my shadow Danesis. But I ask you, if you study my shadow, can you discover the properties of Manos Danesis? No. Therefore, they would study the shadow of Manos Danesis.
Explain to us what we see, the forms that we perceive and which do not have any relation to reality and to truth. Are they originally caused by forms themselves? Or do they reach our eyes with alterations?
I will give you an example so you will understand when we speak of a sphere in the universe. We say the universe is spherical. We are speaking of a four-dimensional non-Euclidean sphere that bears no relation to what we all know to be a sphere. No relation. That is where I will conclude, in that non-Euclidean universe that is described in accordance with the general story of relativity by the geometry of Riemann. If we take a level, listen carefully, a level of the four-dimensional universe, do you know how the human senses would see it?
As a line?
No. As the surface of a sphere.
Curved?
As the surface of a sphere. What you see around you, called the heavenly sphere, the illusion we have. This sphere, this flat sphere, not the space in the sphere. This is flat. This is the flat sphere of the universe that we see as a spherical surface.
In a few words, when the sun rises, when it sets, when the Earth goes around the sun, and all the systems generally, even the galaxy itself, which rotates in several million years, all these circular motions and all those curves we perceive are all illusionary.
I'll make a request. I emphasized as an example in the beginning, it is one thing to speak of the study of the near universe, as when we speak of the sun, planets, and all those heavenly bodies close to us. It is what I said to you about cutting a small piece.
Correct.
And then that small piece behaves like a Euclidean space, that is, a space describable by Euclidean geometry in a very good way.
And it is compatible with our senses.
It is compatible with our senses, compatible with Euclidean geometry, and compatible with Newtonian physics. That is, the laws of Newton with a very good approximation, like the geometry of Euclid, are valid for the near universe. Not always with great exactitude, but in a rough way they are. If we are dealing with very near regions, if we want to build a bridge or a road here on Earth, well then Euclidean theory and Newtonian physics are 100% valid. The deviations are so small that we do not perceive them.
In other words, reality and truth are approximations.
Precisely.
We get closer to the truth as we distance ourselves.
The more total universe we try to study, the more difficulty we have. Therefore, as you understand from what I told you, the senses can perceive a very small piece of the universe, and this is not a matter of instruments. However much stronger our instruments become, our physiology will be the same human one as you understand. Therefore, with the physiology we have, we can perceive the universe up to a point. In some way, what we believe today, with all the views and theories that have been developed, is that the universe that we are able to perceive, owing to our physiology and not to our instruments, is 3 times 10 to the 26th power times smaller than what is really the universe. 3 by 10 to the 26th means 3 with 26 zeros.
I understand it means that it is countless times smaller than the real one.
Therefore, you understand that the observable universe, what the ancient Stoic philosophers called the cosmos, is the cosmos. The universe, as conceived in ancient Greek thought, pre-Socratic thought, is one thing, the cosmos, but the universe is quite another. The cosmos is that part of the universe that falls within the study of our senses, and therefore our measurements.
In our perception.
And our measurements by means of our perception. Human questions that are subject to human common sense have to do with the cosmos, with the near universe. They are meaningful. Common sense has validity within the cosmos, within, that is, that small space of the universe that becomes comprehensible in one way or another, illusion or no illusion of our senses. Beyond that space of the senses extends the universe, whose laws, whose properties are extensions on the one hand of our laws, but are such immense extensions that their logic defies human logic. For example, when contemporary logic speaks of particles that are emitted toward the past and orbit in the past, this is not compatible with human common sense. If I make a bullet out of such particles and put it in a pistol now, and I go to kill my grandmother who died 20 years ago, this is beyond human logic. It is exaggerated. It is not valid.
Yes, I understand.
These are particles produced in the present and which make orbits in the past. In the universe, words such as yesterday, today, tomorrow, up, down, right, left, have no meaning, no meaning. Our problem, however, is the following, that all the forms and shapes which are not Euclidean and are more than 3 dimensions.
Would you explain to the audience the meaning of Euclidean geometry?
Euclidean geometry is the geometry we're taught in the high schools and secondary schools of the country and in all the secondary and high schools in the world, and which tells us that through a point vertical lines intersect. The familiar axioms of Euclid, you will say, that we learn at school, either plane geometry or solid geometry, are not valid. Do not ask me what is valid. These geometries are very difficult. I will try to give you an answer.
Does the universe have formalism?
Certainly it has formalism. There would be no theory of relativity without Riemannian geometry. That our universe is Riemannian and not Euclidean is demonstrated by the following. From the moment that the theory of relativity has been experimentally established, and it has been established, it cannot exist without Riemannian geometry. It means that the universe is Riemannian. I don't know whether you understand my logic. The general theory of relativity is based on the premise that the universe is not Euclidean, but Riemannian. It is described by Riemannian geometry, and this theory has been proven in practice experimentally. This means that its presupposition about Riemannian geometry is correct, for if it were not correct, then we would not have verified experimental results of the theory.
Therefore, today we speak of a theory of relativity that is based on demonstrated facts.
Certainly, this is a given. And because the theory of relativity is proven experimentally, its structural components are indirectly proven. For if they were erroneous, then they would yield erroneous results and unconfirmed experiments.
Is the age of the universe, as it is determined by the theory of relativity, at least as I have understood it, a real age? Or does that too have its virtual elements for the facilitation of certain situations, so that people can understand it?
To understand that, we have to understand what time is. Another very important point arises here. We said in the beginning that when a physical theory about such large sums as those of the universe expresses something, for time expresses something, it has no relation to what our clocks and calendars measure. Time is a dimension, like length, width, height, according to the theory of relativity. To which I make a footnote now that we should not think that the theory of relativity is something transcendent. It is a new theory of gravity. Newton's theory ceases to hold, and another theory of gravity holds. The general theory of relativity is a new theory of gravity. This is what we must all understand. What is relativity? Time is a dimension which, under some specific conditions of high density, or as we said previously, of high curvature, great curvature, can expand or contract.
The discussion with the astrophysics professor Manos Denezis continued on the notions of space, time, gravity, energy, and multiple dimensions. However, from that very useful discussion, a key point emerged in my mind.
We are all one.
We are united by an infinite material that we do not perceive. The in-between, we are all one. Therefore, the philosophical view that we are derived from the one, and we tend towards the one, was established by a newer scientific explanation. That sunlit morning, I walked serenely among the flowers of my garden. It is marvelous to think that you come from God, and to God you will return. To what extent one might say it exists?
What I want to say is this. It is not a case of how we see the universe. It is a case of how is the universe revealed in reality. And what I can say is this. The universe is interpreted on the basis of a logic that differs greatly from the logic that we humans have been calling common sense. Without making a mistake, I believe that when we speak of the universe,
Physics and mathematics explain and determine what we call the universe. Professor Denezis, we live in nature, in a cosmos, and see a universe that we interpret as we see it and feel it, we simple people. You scientists, however, who have delighted in scientific research and have plumbed the depths of the universe, have in mind a different way to interpret it. Would you tell us a few things about the universe? About the way you see the non-perceptible universe? The way in which contemporary science views the universe and man is not easily understandable. The mathematics and physics, which are the basic tools for man to interpret the laws of the universe, produce in many instances definitions and results that are difficult for the ordinary mind to comprehend. I met with the professor of astrophysics at the University of Athens, Manos Danezis, at the Athens Planetarium, and I asked him to explain the methods and manner in which contemporary
as a whole, and not of the universe near us, the universe of the planets, or the space around the Earth, then whatever human logic considers rational, in reality is absurd, and vice versa. I will explain what I mean. What I want to emphasize at the outset is that what I say is not what we feel, but what is revealed by observation, research, and study. What we know today is that human biology, as nature has made us, does not permit us to receive forms and shapes